In business, we don't necessarily get what we want, we get what we optimize for. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through why I started optimizing for enterprise value, not revenue. Don't go anywhere. Hello, welcome back to Woman Owned. Eleanor Beaton here. And in today's episode, I'm going to share with you why I optimize for enterprise value, not for revenue. Here's the deal. Every woman business owner is optimizing for something. Most women-led businesses are optimizing for revenue, and that is why their businesses are not building real value. So let me walk you through what this looks like. When you optimize for revenue, you and your team and your work plans will optimize around whatever it takes to generate as much revenue as possible in the short term. That might mean chasing crazy, exhausting launch tactics. It might mean not optimizing your business model so that the more clients you take on, the more work you have to do. So as you make more money, you are actually working harder and harder and harder, and your business actually becomes more of a trap. It means that as you increase your monthly targets and set growth targets that you try to beat month after month after month, you find yourself and your team getting more exhausted month after month after month because you have optimized for revenue. And when you work in that model, more revenue generally equals more work. Several years ago, there was a specific marketing method that was all the rage for people in my industry. And it was really effective in driving revenue growth in the short term. And everybody was doing it. It was wildly successful. I tried it. Very, very successful way to generate income in the short term. But almost everybody abandoned doing it. There were two things that happened. One, they either abandoned doing it after 2 or 3 months because it was so exhausting, or they stuck with it for a year and got completely burnt out. And it was a great example of the short-term gain, long-term pain of optimizing for revenue. But here's the thing. When you optimize for revenue, revenue itself becomes the strategy and it becomes the scoreboard. But the reality is revenue is designed to be the output of a strategy that you choose, right? So when you optimize for revenue, you're actually optimizing revenue as a strategy. But when you optimize something else, and I'm going to make a case here for enterprise value, revenue becomes the sustainable output of that strategy. So the core idea here is that revenue is not a strategy, it is an output. And so when you optimize your business around revenue, you are optimizing for the wrong thing. All right, so let's talk about why optimizing for revenue actually creates fragility in the business. And I know that many of you are listening like, what? I thought I'm supposed to be optimizing for revenue. Au contraire, friend. No, not necessarily. When you think about businesses that endure, they see revenue as the output, but revenue itself is not the strategy. So here's what happens when you build your entire business, the entire goal, your whole reason for being in business is to optimize for revenue. Here's what happens. When you optimize for revenue, that optimization, that goal requires constant output. It requires constant selling. It requires constant input, and it basically requires short-term cycles. So the pattern becomes when revenue goes up, effort goes up, and then if revenue goes down, panic ensues. So the outcome of optimizing for revenue is going to be a founder-dependent business. And not only a founder-dependent business, but a business where volatility ensues. You can't get out of this feast or famine cycle. You might have had the best year or the best month ever in business, and then you follow that with a really horrific quarter. That sort of up and down motion is a classic sign of a business that has optimized for revenue. So I want to be clear about something. This is not a capability issue. If this is happening to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're incapable or your team is incapable or you're in the wrong industry. It's actually a constraint, a very common constraint in a revenue optimized business approach. When you optimize for revenue, what you're actually optimizing for is activity. But when you optimize for enterprise value, you are then actually optimizing for structure. Okay, so I'm going to say that again because it's so key to this episode. When you optimize for revenue, you are actually optimizing for activity. When you optimize for enterprise value, you optimize for structure. One produces short term gains that are built on consistent hustle. The other produces long term value that is built on the installation of structure. So I decided on my journey that I was going to stop optimizing for revenue and I was going to start optimizing for enterprise value. So, enterprise value is a business that generates predictably. So, we are more focused on predictable compounding growth than we are on short term surges, right? So, you're optimizing for predictable compounding growth. Enterprise value and optimizing for enterprise value is about building a business that is not completely dependent on the founder. Back when I optimized for revenue, I would do whatever I personally needed to do to hit my revenue targets, working on weekends, working on the evenings, pushing harder, adding all kinds of incredible bonuses that I would personally deliver in order to close a sale. You do the things to optimize for sort of the biggest increase in income that you can. When you optimize for enterprise value, you are looking for structure and things that repeat. So it's more measured, it's more restrained, and it's ultimately much more scalable. Enterprise value also is a model where you are optimizing for things that compound over time. So I'll give you an example. I used to spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about juicy bonuses that I could or we could put on every offer that we made that would just convert the maximum amount of people. I can remember one time I actually had as a bonus that we would launch and produce the first 10 episodes of your podcast, right? That was designed to maximize my revenue intake in a very specific quarter. And it sure did. Like we got a ton of customers into, our ecosystem, but it was kind of false because we actually attracted a lot of the wrong people because the bonus was so juicy, right? And so a lot of those customers, we couldn't keep them because they came for the wrong reasons. That's a classic example of optimizing for revenue over enterprise value. In enterprise value, you're looking at making structural decisions so that your revenue and growth compounds over time, even if sometimes you're going to take slower growth in the short term to make sure you have compounding growth in the long term that are backed not by your personal effort or sort of heroics, but by actual structures that you install. So in the Jewel business system, and this is the sales and scaling system that we install inside women-led businesses, everything that we do is designed to produce enterprise value. And so enterprise value, again, is where the business is fundamentally valuable. That value is legible, i.e., it is discernible. People can see it that are not just you. And it is transferable, that value does not just sit with you. It can be transferred to somebody else. This is what gives you maximum potential with the business, not just that you could sell it for the max you can sell it for. It means that people can step in and run the business when you're on vacation, just gives you maximum freedom and optionality. So everything that we do in the Jewel business system is engineered to drive and produce enterprise value. And we look at 5 core builds. And so those core builds are number 1, customer acquisition. So your customer acquisition system, this is you build a system that is intended to maximize sales, right? So that's customer acquisition build. The next build that we often look at is monetization architecture. And that's really looking at the structure of your offers, your pricing, and your business model that maximize the value that your business can create through what it sells. We look at governance architecture, and this really has to do with, do you have clear operating plans, a clear vision, and is that vision and operating plans translated into a weekly rhythm so that you are advancing the business week by week and not having what we call operational drift, where days, weeks, or even months can go by, you actually haven't advanced the business at all. The next build we look at is cash protocol. Now, it's interesting, cash visibility, the clarity and visibility and legibility, not just of your books, but of your cash position. This is so key. In fact, one of the founders in our ecosystem was talking about how she actually lost about $1 million in sale value from a previous company that she'd run because she didn't have strong cash protocols in place. So whether you are looking to really maximize the money that you take out of your business on a month-over-month basis, or you are really looking at how can I make sure that if and when I do sell my business, I get the maximum ticket price I can, that's what cash protocol does. And then the fifth build that we look at is founder liquidity. And this is huge because what this does is it looks at your delivery systems, it looks at your processes, it looks at your decision-making structures and guides. And basically it says, how extractable are you from the business? How liquid are you as the founder? Like if something comes up and you need to step away from the business for 2 weeks at the drop of a hat, can the business still not just survive, but grow without you? That's founder liquidity. And that's the fifth build that we look at when it comes to optimizing for enterprise value. And when you optimize for enterprise value, what you have is a highly valuable, calmly run business that gives you as the founder bandwidth and maximum optionality. It basically allows you to have that dual business model, 30% growth, 30% profitability, 30% open time. That is what the dual business system creates. And we do it not by optimizing for short-term income or revenue, but by maximizing for enterprise value. So that's why we consider ourselves an enterprise value installation category, right? That's the work that we do. It's about enterprise value installation inside women-led businesses. So I want to give you a couple of examples of what this might look like in your business. So if you decide to optimize for enterprise value over revenue, here's what that could look like. So let's say that you are a consultant, you have a consulting firm, and that consulting firm is built on the back of custom work. A lot of the operators in our ecosystem start here. So they have built a very solid business doing custom work for different customers. And the more custom work they do, the more revenue they make. So their goal is to really sell as much custom work as they can. That's going to maximize revenue. And of course, what they find is the trap of optimizing for revenue. The more custom projects they sell or custom consulting engagements, the more they are trapped to their desk, the more they are trapped in delivery. So when they make the move to optimizing not for revenue, but for enterprise value, here's the switch they're going to make. They start to productize their offerings. And that's not just through the offer, but through the systems that deliver that offering. So that as they start to productize their offering, their enterprise value goes up, and they may have a couple of quarters where their revenue stays the same or grows slower than normal because now they've put in a system such that the offerings are much more scalable. And now they can start to sell and make more money without having that be tied to more work. You can see in that example, a lot of times when you're optimizing for income or revenue all the time, but you really desire and yearn for a freedom-based business, you're actually working against yourself. And what you need to be optimizing for is enterprise value. So if you think about, again, that same case of custom work, so if she decides to spend a quarter, or in the dual business system, we actually run on trimesters, because that's how great things are gestated in trimesters. So she may choose for a trimester to focus on repeatable systems. So that's where her extra work is going, into installing repeatable systems. What she'll probably see is that in the short term, she could see slightly slower revenue growth, but in the long term, she is finally overcome this hurdle of having to have her growth tied to greater output and increasing outputs. Another way of thinking about it is the more that you say yes now, yes to more clients, yes, especially if it's custom, right? So when you keep saying yes to custom revenue and custom projects, that means the more projects you do, the more revenue you make, that actually you might make great income in the short term, but your enterprise value stays low, right? And you are pushing structure into something that you do later. So that's the difference between optimizing for revenue and optimizing for enterprise value. When you optimize for enterprise value, sustainable compounding revenue is the output. When you optimize only for revenue, revenue is the only thing you have. And as you well know, that's here today, gone tomorrow. I know which one I would optimize for, and I know which one I do optimize for. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I think I'll wrap this by saying, most businesses, when we first encounter them, they are led by incredibly strong leaders. They are real businesses where the founders are making real decisions. And one of the core challenges that they're dealing with is these businesses are actually under-architected. So some of these enterprise value builds that we're talking about are actually non-existent, which is why growth feels unpredictable, here today, gone tomorrow, and why you as the founder are the glue holding everything together, and it's honestly exhausting. The problem is that often you just can't see where you're under-architected, because a lot of times there's certain things, certain pieces of architecture in the business that are quite strong and certain that are non-existent. So if you want to understand your customer acquisition architecture, remember, this is how you get people coming into your business in the first place. It is one of the this first and most important places to create structure. You should take our sales architecture diagnostic. You can get that at safimedia.co/sales. This is important because we've actually identified through our research with over 25,000 women-led businesses that there are 4 core sales architecture profiles in women-led businesses. You're going to answer 6 very pointed questions. It'll take you about 90 seconds. And we are going to pinpoint for you which of the 4 sales architecture profiles you have, what is working, and the core thing you need to address in order to create more enterprise value and to create a stronger system so that you can get repeatable compounding revenue. Again, it's at safimedia.co/sales. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Send it to a woman operator in your world who would benefit from it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you here next week. Same bat time, same bat place. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. If you found value in what I shared, please go ahead and like this video, give it a thumbs up, and leave me a review or leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next week.